Stablers, the Fullers, the Clunches, Moody's, Holly. I know there's more, but that's all I can come up with right now. And also keep Sister Joy Bozeman in your prayers. Loss of Jackie. I think that's all those on the sick and injured list. And don't forget, today is our third Sunday, so we'll be having a fellowship meal downstairs after morning service. Got a gospel meeting coming up in October. Oh yeah, Myra Hall and Cornea. Remember her? And also, we still haven't reached our goal on getting enough money to replace the projector. So if you got a little extra cash laying around, want to help out, it'd be appreciated. Is there anything else in the way of announcements then this morning? Okay, Brother Dave, would you lead us in a prayer then, please? Amen. Genesis chapter 36. Genesis 36. Brother Terry had gotten us through chapter 35 Wednesday night, and the last verse of 35 says, "And Isaac gave up the ghost and died and was gathered unto his people, being old and full of days, and his sons Esau and Jacob buried him." And then we start with chapter 36, and that is basically the genealogy of Esau. And if you were here Wednesday night, Brother Terry said that you was going to have a test today. So somebody be bold and brave and step out and tell me all the sons of Esau. Never mind. Seriously, though, it is a genealogy. It is listing Esau's sons, but we're not going to read the whole chapter or go through things. There's just a few verses that I want to take time to point out. The first one is verse 1. Now these are the generations of Esau, who is Edom. And we need to remember as we get along farther into the Bible here about the Edom and the Edomites, where they came from. They came from Esau, which was the son of Isaac, which was the brother of Jacob. So as we get to it, we'll point it out again, but that just makes a thread or a connection as we go through and builds a little background in history. In verse 6, also then it says, Esau took his wives, his sons, and his daughters, and all the persons of his house, and his cattle, and all his beasts, and all his substance which he had got in the land of Canaan, and went into the country from the face of his brother Jacob. For their riches were more than that they might dwell together, and the land wherein they were strangers could not bear them because of their cattle. Have we not seen this same thing happen before? Not with these two, but Abraham and Lot had to separate because their herds were so big that they couldn't stay on the same plot of land. For those of you that are not familiar with cattle and livestock, if you are depending strictly on the grass with no supplemental feed, it takes a lot of ground for them. There is a ranch in Texas that was, I guess you could call, founded or acquired back in the 1800s. It's called King's Ranch. It's the largest ranch in Texas. 825,000 acres. That is a lot of territory. If you're not familiar with acreage, a man in a four-wheel drive, if the land permitted, couldn't drive around the perimeter of that in one day's daylight. You might do it in a 24-hour period, but it would be tough to get around in a day's time. So that is a lot of land. But so these two at least had a Jacob and Esau. At this point, they weren't enemies anymore. Remember back when Esau had threatened to kill Jacob next time he saw him, or after his father died. Well, his father died. They got together and buried him, and then they divide up they go their separate ways, but they go away from each other in a friendly manner. It's not having to get away, so to speak. Just because they had so much possession. In verse 8 it says, "Thus Esau dwelt in Mount Seir." Esau is Edom, so that just reinforces that. "And these are the generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites, in Mount Seir." Now we're going to cover this just a little bit later, but if you will look over at Joshua chapter 24, Joshua 24, and read verse 2 through 4. Joshua 24. Starting with verse 2, it says, "And Joshua said unto all the people, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, Your fathers dwelt on the other side of the flood in old times, even Terah, the father of Abraham, and the father of Nachor, and they served other gods." Now on the other side meant that they had lived at one time on being the other side, meaning the other side of the Euphrates. And that's where Abram was told, later became Abraham, and that's where the journey started. So they had lived on that side at one time. And then verse 3, "And I took your father Abraham from the other side of the flood, the Euphrates, and led him throughout all the land of Canaan, and multiplied his seed, and gave him Isaac. And I gave unto Isaac Jacob and Esau, and I gave unto Esau Mount Seir to possess it, but Jacob and his children went down into Egypt." So that's telling you, in Joshua, we're looking back at history, but here in this book, in Genesis, we're looking forward. So when Esau and Jacob divided, Jacob was still in the land that he possessed, which was south of where Esau was going. And we'll cover that in just a little bit. But in essence, that is basically everything that we need to know out of verse 36, unless you want to go down and read all those names, because like I say, that is genealogy from that point on. As many times as Andrew and I have read the Bible together and gone through these, we don't skip them. We read them every time. But I think if we had a tape of recording of every time we read them and compare them, many of them we would be pronouncing differently every time we read them. So, anything else that you would like to discuss on chapter 36 then? When we get to chapter 37, Jacob dwelt in the land wherein his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. We just talked about that. Jacob stays south in Canaan, and Esau went north up to Mount Seir. And if you look at verse 14 of this chapter, it will explain just a little bit farther, more where he went. And he said to him, "Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren," and we'll cover that in a few minutes, "and well with the flock, and bring me word again." So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. So it appears as though he is living in the vale of Hebron or near Hebron, and we're going to discuss that a little bit more when we get to it. But there's a lot of people, it's like being in the United States. If I were to say, let's go to Huntsville, everybody that lived in Alabama would want to go where? Huntsville, Alabama. If they had a Texas background, where would they want to go? An Arkansas background, where would they want to go? So there's a lot of cities in this region that had the same names, and there's a lot of discussion of which Hebron or Vale of Hebron they're talking about. But I think we can pretty much clarify that when we go when we get to that particular section. But apparently Jacob dwelt in the land of Canaan, Vale of Hebron, or near Hebron. And then these are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brethren, and the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and with the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought unto his father their evil report. All right. He was probably hanging around with these because they were closer to his age. I was an only child, so I don't know this on a personal basis, but I know from some of my cousins, large family, and some of them were kind of spread out in age. It seemed like the older ones hung together and the younger ones hung together. So that is probably what is taking place. But notice that Joseph brought unto his father an evil report. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors. He not only loved Joseph because he was the son of his old age, but what other reason did he love Joseph? Favorite wife, Rachel. Coat of many colors. Now, I don't know this for a fact that that's why he did this, but the Romans, it was their custom that people would wear a coat, a toga, with, instead of just being a pure white toga, it would have stripes on it. And then when they turned 17, I guess that was their maturing age or whatever in Roman society, and they dropped the one with the stripes or the fringe and went with white. I personally don't think that was the case here. I think that the coat of many colors was valued because of the sheep. Normally the sheep in that region was pure white, and Jacob had taken the spotted and the striped instead of taking the pure bred sheep, and he made him a coat, and that would have been of more value than a pure white coat. So the coat of many colors was just something distinctive for him. Also, in those days, the coat would refer to something that would be full length, down to the wrist, down to the ankles. which if you were wearing a coat like that, it wasn't meant for field work. It wasn't meant for outdoor work. So it could be that because Joseph was his favorite, that he put on him lesser task. Don't know that. I'm just giving you a lot of things to think about here. But as we get to it, he had made him a coat of many colors. His brothers knew that the father loved him more than the rest of them. And in verse 4 it says, and when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceable unto him. In that region of the world, when somebody meets somebody, and I might not get this phrasing just right, Bobby can help me out if I miss it, but they would say something like salam, which means peace to you, or go in peace. And if somebody did not respond immediately, it was a sign that they didn't want to accept that they would be more of an enemy than a friend. Is that still the way it was when recently, or you know, never been? Okay. But anyway, they couldn't speak to him peaceably. It said, I'm sorry? Right. As Brother Clark said, if you didn't hear him, the coat being of value and being his was sort of elevating him in position over, and he was the youngest over his older brothers. Now, as I sat down and started looking at this, in essence, there are three reasons that his brothers hated him. Three. Can you think of them? Brother Clarence just said one of them. Okay. So Brother Clarence just said that he was the favorite. So they hated him because Father loved him more than he did them. Second, he told on them. He was a tattletale. And what would be the third one? I'm sorry? Okay. If we go down to verse 5, it tells us the third reason. Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. See, the dreams that we're going to look at here as we go along, he would dream a dream, and he would elevate himself above his brothers, or the dream elevated him above the brothers in the dream. So now they could look at him, and personally, I think that if we just sort of narrow it down the best we can as to the reasons, his brothers hated him because he was Father's favorite. He told on them when they did wrong, and he bragged. Even though he wasn't bragging, he was just telling facts that could be considered a brag. So, like I say, I think those are the three reasons his brothers hated him. Because the one dream here, he said unto them, I pray you this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright, and behold, your sheaves stood around about me, and made obeisance to me, to my sheaf. Well, if we take that one hard word out, basically what it means is that your sheaves stood around about me and bowed or worshiped or paid homage to my sheep. So can you see where his brothers might take that as a slight or not in a good way? Yes. Right. And if you go into the history of it, as Brother Clarence said, Jacob was the favorite of his mother, and we saw what that got him. So you can see how things are developing along those lines. Verse 8, and his brethren said to him, shalt thou indeed reign over us, or shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. So apparently this was not his first dream, and every dream that he dreamed, or every dream that he told them about, would just get them a little bit more bitter and a little bit more bitter until the rage just built up. Questions or comments then through verse 8? He was the youngest. He was only about 17 at the time, as we just read. So he's, he's just telling what he dreams and doesn't consider other people's feelings at this point, I guess you could say. Verse 9, and he dreamed yet another dream and told it his brethren and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold. Now, before I get into this one, I want to back up to the previous dream. They were cattle people. But to raise cattle, you also have to lay in the hay and do some other things here. But when it's talking about the sheaves, this could possibly, not saying it is, but could possibly be a forecast of his life that was to come, because what happened to him in Egypt? What was his primary role in Egypt? Divvying out the food, taking care of the food. So, yes, sir. Well, actually Benjamin came along, so he was younger, but thank you. But down to this other dream. I've dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obeisance to me. What is referred to moon and stars? Sun and moon. Father. The brothers, okay. So whichever mother, wife it would be son, father, moon, mother, and then the 11 stars would be representative of the brothers. And when he told it to his father and to his brethren, his father rebuked him and said unto him, what is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee to the earth? We have to go back and remember what was the ordinary path of honor. The oldest down, he's 11th in line. So his father is rebuking him, and his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. Brothers envied him. Isn't that what creates most problems in most families? Is jealousy, envy. Verse 12, and his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. Now, what had happened in Shechem a couple of 3 chapters ago? Dinah, the sister, so 2 of the brothers had slaughtered the Shechemites, but they go there to feed the flock. And Israel said unto Joseph, do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, and I will send thee unto them. And he said unto him, here I am. Now this next verse, there's several things in this next verse I'd like for us to think about. And we're going to be going through the verse slow, and as I get to them, we'll talk about them. And he said unto him, go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren. What could he mean by that? I'm sorry? Make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. However, remember what he had said earlier after his sons had slaughtered them, that the people around might come after him. So he could have here just a twinge of thought about their safety. Are they okay? And well with the flocks. So he wants to know if they're doing okay, if the flocks are doing okay. And bring me word again. So he sent him out of the vale of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. Now, the vale of Hebron, if it is the one that we think it is on the map, and Mount Seir, not Mount Seir, Shechem, they're about 60 miles apart, roughly 60 miles. Shechem is about 60 miles north of Hebron. Is that reasonable for somebody to take cattle that far away to feed them? I think it is, because if we go back, Lot and Abraham had to separate. Well, just with Jacob, how many days' journey was Jacob away from Laban when he separated their flocks to feed? 3 days' journey. If you take slow travel, being 2 miles an hour with cattle and all, that would be a slow move. You're going to get into 15 to 20 miles a day. And if it goes faster, you can go more. So at a minimum, you're 45 miles away in a 3-day journey, and up to 60 or so in a 3-day journey. So it is reasonable, because that area is kind of sparse on food. So it would, Brother Golden. Yeah. Yeah, he had moved a great distance away. And also remember that how large their herds were, large their flocks were. And when he got to, when Joseph got there, and a certain man found him and said, behold, he was wandering in the field, and the man asked him, saying, what seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren. Tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. And the man said, they are departed hence, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. Now, Dothan is another 12 miles north of Shechem. So now they're getting into roughly 70 miles distance. Now, what makes that so important, at least in my mind, the distance? If we are here and somebody were to come to you, let's take Joel, since he's got a couple of young ones. And one of his children is missing. What is he immediately going to do? He's going to go out searching, right? What if something happened, if your family was traveling and they were 100 or so miles away, and you got a phone call that something had happened? Today, in our modern day and age, with all the transportation we have, if it's 100 miles, we can be there in a pretty quick. Give you a rough idea, when I found out my daughter had been shot down in Troy, it took Andrew and I not very long to get there. And matter of fact, when we got to the emergency room, the doctor, or one of the cops, said, you came from north of Montgomery? Yeah. You didn't let any grass grow, did you? So you can get there in a hurry with modern. But back in those days, he is on foot a 3 days journey away from where they had been. So it's not as easy to go out looking for somebody when they're a distance away. So especially when they bring clothes in that they've been torn up and maybe killed. So, like I say, personally, I just think that needs to be thought of as we go through this. Yes, sir. Right. And David had even said that he had killed wild beasts uh, that could be, but still they were the legitimate heirs. Verse 18, and when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. When they saw him afar off, how'd they recognize him afar off? Very distinctive clothing he was wearing, right? That region of the world, even by tribes, even today, Edomite, Amorite, etc. If you'll notice as we get along through here, when they see the caravan coming, that's identified before they talk to them too, just based on their style of clothes or color of clothes. So, but they start to conspire to slay him. As we go through this, watch how they talk about this. They don't seem the least bit concerned. They had not killed family members, but they had slain in great numbers before. So, mm-hmm. Yeah. But they conspired to slay him, and they said one to another, behold, the dreamer is coming. So, like Brother Conyers said, they're trying to not say Joseph. They're not trying to put a personality with it. They're trying to put an object with it. So the dreamer is coming. Come now, therefore, and let us slay him and cast him into some pit, and we will say some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. So they're plotting against him, but they're very calm in their demeanor doing it. They're not excited. It would be like, in today's society, sometimes we refer to people as cold-blooded killers. What is the difference between a cold-blooded murderer or a cold-blooded killer versus someone that has killed and taken a life? Intent, premeditation. There's a lot of things involved in it, but basically the ones that we consider cold-blooded are detached, emotionless about it, no moral grounding. When we look at some of our serial killers, we call them what? Pure evil. That gets into a different area, but so come now, therefore, and let us slay him. We've gone through that. Verse 21, and Reuben heard it. Now, who's Reuben? One of the sons, but who's Reuben? Oldest. Exactly. Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands and said, let us not kill him. There's a couple of things I want to point out about Reuben. Is Reuben of high moral character? I see a couple of heads shaking no. He went into Bilhah, who was his father's wife, the handmaid that was his father's wife, and lay with her. I wouldn't call that an upright, outstanding citizen, would you? So he's not a saint, but at the same time, he is not cruel. Could be. Oh, but now let's go to Genesis chapter 49. If we want to know what his father thought about him later, not back in chapter 35 when he went into his father's handmaid, but when he was about to die, let's look at chapter 49, starting with verse 3. Remember, Jacob had called his sons together in chapter 49 here. Jacob had called his sons together. His last days, verse 42 says, "Gather yourselves and hear me, you sons of Jacob, and hearken unto your father." Verse 3, "Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power. Unstable as water, thou shalt not excel, because thou wentest up to thy father's bed, then defilest thou it. He went up to my couch." That sums him up. His father says that he is excellent of dignity and excellent of power, but unstable. And he had done something that he shouldn't have done. But in this particular situation that we're looking at back here in verse 36 or 37, Reuben is trying to protect a younger brother. Yes, sir, Brother Golden. And we can go all the way back then and see what happened with Sarah and Hagar, Ishmael and Isaac. I'm sorry? Right. So Reuben, being the oldest, was trying to protect the brother. Verse 22, "Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him to his father again." He was trying to convince them not to kill him, put him in a pit, and he was trying to do that so he could get him from them and get him back to his father. So, of the 12 brothers, one was the victim, one was trying to save him, and 10 were out to get him. Verse 23, "It came to pass when Joseph was coming to his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him." First, why would they do that? Why would they take the coat away from him instead of just laying hands on him and confining him? Coat was a symbol. Father gave him coat of many colors, distinguished him from someone else. They wanted to take that symbol because of their envy and jealousy. And Brother Luke, you can't be counting yet. I need to pick up the pace here just a little bit. "And they took him and cast him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it." Again, they're following Reuben's instructions because Reuben didn't want him hurt. And then they sat down to eat bread, and look how callous they are. They have just imprisoned a young man, a family member, a brother, and now they sat down to eat. Lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels bearing spicery and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. And Judah said unto his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content. Did Judah just have a change of heart about slaying his brother? I think if you go back up to the reason, it was just convincing his brothers, hey, if we kill him, we're not going to get anything out of this, so let's sell him instead of kill him. Then there passed by Midianites, merchantmen. I thought they said Ishmaelites. Brother Golden? And there were Midianites with the group. They were it was common for them to travel together for protection and other things. Then there passed by Midianite merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph into Egypt. And Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. And he returned unto his brethren and said, the child is not, and I, whither shall I go? He's upset. He had tried to convince them to let him just take him back to the father. Renting clothes is a symbol, something they do. It'd be very similar to when I was growing up, long time ago. It was very customary for people who had lost a family member to wear black for a while. That custom is no longer in effect in most parts of the United States today. We bury him today, and tomorrow we're going about our business. But here, he rent his clothes, and that was just a symbol of the way they did things. And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats and dipped the coat in the blood. And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, this have we found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or no. Wait a minute. How many coats could there be like that one? It would have been unique. Those brothers knew, well, more reasons than one. Even if they hadn't have seen it happen, they would have known that coat. But how cruel is it now to take that coat to the father, and there be a child out there living, and them play dumb and innocent and make the father think that a wild beast has killed his favorite son? Isn't that kind of cold? 33, he knew it and said, it is my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured him, and Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. And Jacob rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days. And now pay attention to this verse. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, for I will go down in my grave unto my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and the captain of the guard. Again, the cruelty is not only that they portrayed that his favorite son had been killed by beast, they went on with the pretense and tried to comfort him. Hypocrisy. Cold-blooded. And we'll pick up there Wednesday night with Brother. Yes, sir. Oh, yeah. Brother Clunch just brought up the case in Colorado where the man had killed his two daughters and his wife and had put the two daughters in barrels of oil and all where he worked, and was just going on TV begging for people to bring information forward, and he knew all along that he had been the guilty one. So it happens today. Thank y'all so much for your comments and your attention.